Welcome. If you're trying to navigate the complexities of bringing artificial intelligence into your organization, you're in the right place.
Yeah, today we're trying to give you a shortcut, really. A way to quickly get up to speed on the key things to consider.
Exactly. We're focusing on AI policies, ethics, managing risk, all that crucial stuff.
And we're drawing on some solid material here, mainly from ISACA, their ebook, Keeping Pace with AI, and also insights from AI expert Geetha Murugan.
Our mission, let's say, for this deep dive is to pull out those really vital insights for you.
We want to help you understand these evolving areas without getting bogged down in, excessive detail.
And it's incredibly relevant right now. There was an ISAC AI pulse poll. Quite striking, actually.
Yeah, what did it find?
It found 85%. That's a huge majority of digital trust professionals think they'll need more AI training within the next 2 years.
Wow, 85%. So just by tuning into this, you're already ahead of the curve thinking about these issues.
Definitely. And one thing that ISACA material really highlights is, well, the lack of formal AI policies right now.
Yeah.
Especially for generative AI.
That's right. The study found only about 10% of organizations actually have comprehensive policies for generative AI.
Only 10%. It really makes you think, doesn't it? How are companies managing this on the ground?
It's a bit of a Wild West situation in some places, I suspect. It really underscores the need for structure.
Which brings us to something called an AI Acceptable Usage Policy, or AUP. The sources mention this. What exactly is that?
An AUP, well, it's basically the rule book for using AI responsibly within an organization. It provides the guidelines.
Okay.
And given how fast things like generative AI are moving, having this kind of policy is becoming vital. It's about balancing the huge potential benefits against the inherent risks.
Right, balancing act. Okay, so let's dig into that. When an organization decides, okay, we need a generative AI policy, what are the foundational concepts they need to get right first? ISA talks about policies versus standards.
Yeah, that's a really fundamental distinction. So the policy itself is the high-level document. It's the what and the why.
The overall goals, the principles.
Exactly. What you must do, what you can't do. It reflects the organization's culture, its goals, and tells staff what's expected. Think of it as the guiding philosophy.
Got it. The big picture. So what about standards then? How do they fit in?
Standards are the detailed how-to. They're the mandatory requirements, often very specific, maybe even based on external benchmarks.
Ah, so much more granular.
Right. For AI, standards would cover things like exactly how data must be handled, specific security protocols, that sort of thing. They make the policy actionable.
That makes sense. Policy sets the direction, standards provide the roadmap. Okay, so before you even start drafting this policy, what homework does an organization need to do? The ISACA ebook lists several key steps.
Yes, and these preliminary steps are crucial. You can't just jump into writing. First, you absolutely need to understand generative AI.
Beyond just the buzzwords.
Precisely. What can it actually do for your organization? What are the real risks? The potential benefits? You need some familiarity with common models, too, like ChatGPT or DALL-E. Knowing, for instance, that ChatGPT learns from vast internet text helps you anticipate the kinds of outputs it might generate.
Right, you need that context to set sensible rules. What comes next?
Then you need to assess organizational needs. How are you actually planning to use generative AI? Content creation, automating processes, data analysis, customer service.
Because the policy needs to match the intended use case.
Exactly. A policy for internal data analysis will look different from one governing a customer-facing chatbot.
Makes sense. What else is on that prep list?
You have to survey the regulatory landscape. AI doesn't operate in a vacuum. There are laws, regulations specific to your industry, your location.
Compliance is key from the start.
Absolutely. And this research might even influence your tech choices, like whether you can use a public AI platform or need a private, more controlled one, depending on data sensitivity.
Interesting. Okay, regulations checked. What about the potential downsides?
That leads straight into conducting a risk assessment. You need to proactively identify what could go wrong.
Like what?
Technical risks, maybe the AI gives inaccurate outputs or it's unstable. And operational risks, too. How reliable is it? Ethical risks, like generating misleading information or biased content. You need to anticipate these.
Better to know what you might be facing, and then clarity on the policy's purpose.
Yes, definitely. You need to confirm the purpose and scope. What's the main objective here? Ethical use, meeting legal standards, just giving users clear guidance.
And what exactly does it cover?
Right. Does this policy apply only to generative AI models or all AI systems the organization uses? Defining that scope prevents confusion later.
Good point. The sources also mention looking inwards. at existing rules.
That's right. Examine existing IT and InfoSec policies. Don't reinvent the wheel if you don't have to. Are there existing clauses about data handling, security, acceptable use that you can borrow or adapt?
For consistency.
Yes, and to make sure things align. You don't want conflicting policies causing confusion.
Okay, so check existing policies. Now, a policy is only good if people actually, follow it. How do you ensure that?
That's where engaging stakeholders comes in. This is absolutely critical. You need to bring people into the development process.
Who are we talking about here?
A wide range, really. Executive leadership for strategic direction, legal for compliance, technical teams for feasibility, communications, risk management, people from various business groups who will actually use the AI.
So everyone has a voice.
Exactly. It makes the policy more robust, more practical, and it builds buy-in from the start. People are more likely to adhere to something they had a hand in creating.
That makes total sense. So you've got input, you've drafted something. What's next?
Then you need to prepare for communication, both internal and external. A policy isn't a fire and forget document.
It needs to be communicated clearly.
Yes. Employees need to know what the policy says, why it's important, what happens if it changes. And sometimes customers or regulators need to understand your approach to AI and data too. Transparency builds trust.
Okay. And the tech itself plays a role in policy creation.
It does. You need to understand your technical environment. What specific AI solutions are you using? What kind of models? Where does the data come from? Are there known biases? What are the actual capabilities and limitations?
Because that influences decisions like public versus private platform.
Precisely. Technical realities constrain policy choices sometimes.
This sounds like a lot to juggle.
Yeah.
Is there a framework, a structured way to manage all this? The sources mentioned a governance framework.
Yes, a governance framework is really the recommended approach. It provides that structure for decision-making, oversight, and accountability.
How does it help practically?
It answers those key questions. Who actually owns this policy? Who's responsible for keeping it updated? Who audits the AI systems? Who ensures compliance day to day? Is there an AI steering committee overseeing things?
So clear roles and responsibilities.
Exactly. The benefits are huge. Clarity, accountability, transparency, consistency in applying the policy, better risk management, building trust with stakeholders, ensuring compliance.
And flexibility too.
And flexibility, crucially. AI changes so fast, the governance framework needs to allow the policy to adapt.
Okay, that framework sounds essential. Now let's shift gears slightly. You've done the prep, you've got a framework. What about the key considerations when you're actually implementing or adopting a generative AI policy? ISA flags some important questions here.
Absolutely. Implementation throws up its own set of challenges. First big question: who is impacted by the policy scope?
And you mentioned earlier it's not just employees.
Right. Think about consumers. How is their data being used by these AI systems? Regulators will want to know you're following responsible AI principles. And internally, staff need the why behind the policy. Plus, you need to define specific roles. What are managers responsible for? What about individual employees, IT?
Clear roles again.
Right.
Okay, what about the systems themselves? Security must be huge.
Paramount. Are the AI systems secure? You have to protect against unauthorized access misuse, especially if the AI can generate sensitive or potentially harmful content.
So proving security is a must.
Before, during, and after deployment. And a really important point here: employees shouldn't just be feeding company data into public AI tools without explicit permission and safeguards. That's a major risk.
I can see that. Huge potential for data leaks.
Definitely. And you need a feedback loop, too. How do you report issues with AI outputs? How do you assess if the system is performing as expected? Can you really trust its output?
Good questions. What about defining what people can and can't do with the AI?
That's the next point. What does good behavior look like, and what are the acceptable terms of use? The policy needs to be crystal clear.
Defining the boundaries.
Yes. For example, maybe AI use is limited strictly to business purposes. It must align with the data privacy rules. And crucially, you need to spell out prohibited uses just as clearly as permitted ones.
And that might vary by industry.
Oh, absolutely. What's unacceptable in finance might be different from, say, marketing. Context matters.
Right. Now, AI runs on data. What about guidelines for handling that?
Critical area. What guidelines are in place for data handling and training? How do you source data, especially personal or sensitive data?
Privacy is key here.
Huge emphasis on using de-identified or anonymized data wherever possible, and data quality is non-negotiable. Poor data leads to poor, potentially biased AI results.
Garbage in, garbage out. Makes sense. And with AI creating content, how do you ensure transparency? People need to know if they're interacting with AI or reading AI-generated text, right?
Like, that's the transparency and attribution piece. Should the policy mandate disclosure, like using watermarks or clear labels on AI-generated content?
Okay, so identifying the source.
Yes, and who's responsible for that content? If AI generates a report, who reviewed it? Who's accountable for its accuracy and distribution? Procedures for review and validation are essential.
Accountability. Got it. And keeping up with the law.
Always. How will your organization ensure legal and compliance requirements are met? Local laws, national, international. Think copyright, data protection, preventing misinformation. It's a complex web.
And being realistic about AI's limits.
Yes, acknowledging limitations and risks. The policy should be clear that AI isn't infallible. Human oversight is still needed. Don't just blindly trust the output.
Important reminder. Now, most organizations have tons of policies already. How does this new AI policy connect?
It can't be a silo. You need to show how this policy links to others, like data privacy, info security. They're all interconnected.
An integrated approach.
Exactly. Maybe provide links within the AI policy to those related documents. AI touches so many parts of the business, the policies need to work together.
Okay. What about unusual situations, exceptions to the rule?
Good point. How will you handle exceptions? There needs to be a process. Maybe a specific project needs a tool that's usually disallowed. How does someone request approval? Who decides? The policy should outline that escalation path.
A process for the edge cases. Now, AI is evolving incredibly fast. How often do these policies need revisiting?
This is vital. Policies can't be static. How and when will the policy be updated? You need ongoing education, too.
So not just a one-time training.
No way. And if a new AI capability emerges, what's the process to assess its impact on the policy? How do you get updated guidance out to staff quickly?
So how often should updates happen?
At least annually is the recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, probably more often, especially if you're deploying new AI tools or the regulatory landscape shifts, which it does constantly.
Needs to be flexible.
Very. And build in a way for stakeholders to give feedback. That helps continuous improvement.
Okay, regular updates. What if someone breaks the rule?
The policy needs to address how violations are reported and investigated. IT needs the tools to investigate. The right people need to be able to review AI usage logs or communications if needed.
And consequences.
Often, existing employee codes of conduct or HR policies already cover disciplinary actions. The AI policy can reference those. Consequences would depend on the severity, of course.
Right. And finally, who keeps this whole thing running?
You need to establish who will review, manage, and audit the policy. Clear ownership is key to keeping it current and effective. Given how fast AI changes and how many stakeholders are interested, ongoing risk assessment and support for the policy owners are crucial.
Okay, that's a really thorough look at building and managing AI policies. It's clear they need to be living documents, constantly evolving.
Absolutely. It's not a one-and-done task.
Let's pivot slightly now to another really critical area, AI ethics. Why does this matter so much in the AI conversation?
Well, AI ethics is fundamentally about ensuring AI is used responsibly. It's about preventing it from, going rogue or causing harm, intentionally or unintentionally.
So it touches on a lot of areas.
Oh, yeah. Technology, privacy, security, fairness, human values, trust, bias. It's a broad field.
Okay, let's break down some key implications. What about AI trust and bias? That seems like a huge challenge.
It really is. Defining what fairness even means in an AI context is incredibly difficult. Different groups have different definitions. And because of that, creating AI systems that everyone agrees are perfectly fair is, well, maybe impossible right now.
So managing bias is complex.
Very. And closely related is AI, privacy, and our data.
Right. AI often needs lots of data to work well.
Exactly. And there's this constant tension, isn't there, between using personal data for potentially beneficial AI applications and an individual's right to control their own information. Think GDPR and similar laws.
So ethical AI design needs to consider privacy from the start.
Yes. Minimizing data collection, ensuring robust security, maintaining confidentiality, these have to be built in.
Interesting. Now, something maybe less obvious. AI's impact on the environment.
Yeah, this is a two-sided coin. On one hand, training these huge AI models, especially the large language models, takes an enormous amount of energy.
Like how much?
One estimate mentioned the carbon footprint of training a single large AI model could be equivalent to the lifetime emissions of 5 cars.
Wow, that's significant.
It is. But on the other hand, AI also has potential to help with environmental challenges, optimizing energy grids, improving climate modeling, developing new sustainable materials.
So a complex relationship there too. What about the global picture, the AI technology race?
That's definitely happening. Countries and companies are racing for AI dominance, investing heavily in research, development, and talent.
What are the implications of that?
It raises questions, Will this widen the gap between large economies and smaller ones? Who gets the competitive advantages? How do we ensure AI literacy is widespread?
Big geopolitical questions. And unfortunately, there's also the darker side, AI and weapons.
Yes, this is a deeply concerning area. There's potential for AI to be misused in developing things like novel chemical weapons. And then there's the whole field of autonomous weapon systems, or AWS.
Lethal autonomous weapons, sometimes called killer robots.
Exactly. The risks there are significant. Think about it. They could lower the threshold for going to war because perpetrators feel less direct danger. They offer anonymity. You could deploy swarms of them. They might be harder to counter than traditional
Not
weapons.
sobering. Are these widely used now?
Thankfully, fully autonomous lethal systems are still limited by current tech and international debate. But we already see manually controlled drones being used extensively, even by non-state groups. The potential for greater autonomy is what worries many experts.
Okay, so ethics touches on fairness, privacy, environment, global competition, even warfare. How does this connect back to the professionals listening, the audit, risk, governance folks?
Well, with AI having such a profound impact on people's lives and businesses, the responsibility for those in audit, risk, and governance roles increases significantly. They're on the front lines of ensuring data governance, building trust, maintaining security and privacy.
And auditing AI systems themselves must be challenging.
Extremely. Right now, there aren't globally agreed upon standards for how to audit an AI system comprehensively. So, an ethics based approach becomes crucial, looking at the AI's purpose, its underlying code, its data sources, its potential effects, its fairness.
So risk management is key here.
Absolutely. AI risk management is central to responsible AI development. It's about aligning the AI systems with human values, making them human-centric, socially responsible, sustainable. It forces critical thinking about potential negative impacts before they happen.
So IT auditors, risk managers, governance pros need to really focus here.
They do, and understanding AI ethics can actually be a career differentiator. There's a huge demand for AI skills, obviously, but foundational tech skills alone aren't enough.
What kind of skills are we talking about?
Things like data science, analytics, maybe some Python, machine learning basics, software engineering concepts, those are becoming baseline. But layering AI ethics knowledge on top helps you navigate the really complex issues.
And ISAC has resources for this.
Yes, they offer things like an ethics and AI course. It aims to give people guiding principles for responsible AI development and use, covering ethical issues, social implications, and how to communicate effectively about AI ethics.
Good to know. Okay, that gives us a strong sense of the ethical landscape. Let's move to our final major theme, applying risk appetite and risk tolerance specifically in the age of AI.
Right. As you said, AI adoption isn't really optional anymore for competitiveness, but it absolutely introduces risk potential gains, yes, but also potential losses.
So you need a smart approach.
A nuanced approach, exactly. You want to avoid the bad outcomes, sure, but you also want to position yourself to actually gain those competitive advantages AI offers. You can't be completely risk averse.
Finding that sweet spot. What's the starting point for an organization?
Assessing risk tolerance is crucial, especially when you consider how much IT spending is projected to shift towards AI.
Can you give an example?
Sure, imagine a big retailer wants to use AI for inventory management. Great potential for predictive analytics, right? But there's a risk. What if the AI's predictions are inaccurate? You could end up with way too much stock or run out of popular items.
Big financial implications either way.
Exactly. So understanding their risk tolerance helps them set thresholds. Like what percentage error rate in the AI's predictions are they willing to accept before it triggers alarms or requires intervention?
Okay, that makes it concrete. Now, earlier we touched on risk appetite versus risk tolerance. Let's really nail down the difference.
Okay. Risk appetite is the big picture. It's the overall amount and type of risk an organization is willing to accept to achieve its strategic goals. Senior leadership usually sets this. It's about the general willingness to take calculated risks for potential rewards.
The overall philosophy on risk.
Right. Risk tolerance, on the other hand, is much more specific and operational. It's the acceptable level of variation or deviation from objectives related to specific risks.
So more like specific limits.
Exactly. Quantifiable or qualitative thresholds. Think of them as guardrails for specific activities or systems. Appetite sets the tone, tolerance sets the limits.
Got it. Appetite is the direction, tolerance is the boundary lines on the road. The sources use a chatbot example for this too, right?
Yes. For an AI customer service chatbot, the risk appetite statement might say something like, we embrace AI to enhance customer service and will accept moderate risk for deployments that significantly improve engagement.
Okay, strategic intent.
Then the risk tolerance statement would get specific. The chatbot's error rate for booking trips must remain below 0.5%. System downtime must not exceed 1 hour per month during operating hours. See the difference?
Yeah, much more measurable. Very practical for the team running the chatbot. How do they track against those tolerance levels?
Using KPIs and KRIs, key performance indicators, and key risk indicators. KPIs measure how well it's doing its job. KRIs flag up potential problems or rising risk levels.
So they monitor performance against those specific tolerance thresholds.
Exactly. It allows for early detection if something's going off track.
The sources also described applying risk tolerance to de-risk AI deployment. Can you walk us through that process, maybe using the chatbot again?
Sure, it's generally a few steps. Step 1, risk identification. What could go wrong with this chatbot? Inaccurate answers, maybe a data breach, not complying with regulations, system crashes.
Listing out the potential problems.
Step 2, applying risk tolerance. For each risk, how much can we tolerate? For the chatbot, maybe there's a very low tolerance for privacy breaches or giving significantly wrong information. Say, less than that 0.5% error rate we mentioned.
Setting the acceptable limits for each risk.
Step 3, de-risking strategies. Okay, how do we mitigate these risks to stay within our tolerance levels? Maybe start with a small proof of concept, POC. Use agile methods to build and test incrementally. Implement strong security controls like encryption, detailed logging, maybe human validation for certain outputs.
Taking practical steps to reduce the risk.
And finally, step 4, continuous risk monitoring. Keep tracking those KPIs and KRIs. Regularly check performance. Is it staying within the tolerance bands? Do we need to adjust our strategies?
A cyclical process, really. Identify, set limits, mitigate, monitor, and repeat.
Exactly. It's not a one-off exercise.
The ISACA material sums it up nicely, saying, risk tolerance acts as a trusted compass for organizations in the age of AI. Can you elaborate on that? Why a compass?
Well, AI introduces a lot of uncertainty, right? It's new territory. A compass helps you navigate when you're unsure of the terrain. Risk tolerance gives organizations that direction.
It helps them make decisions.
Yes, it helps them measure how much risk they're comfortable taking to get the benefits of AI. It guides decisions about which AI projects to pursue, how to implement them, what controls are needed. It helps balance the opportunities against challenges like privacy, bias, disruption.
So it ensures progress is deliberate, not reckless.
Precisely. Deliberate and secure progress. It helps make AI a managed asset, not just an unknown quantity.
That's a great way to put it. Okay, so to wrap things up for you, our listener, hopefully you've got a much clearer picture now of what's involved in bringing AI into an organization thoughtfully.
We've covered the need for proactive, well-defined AI policies, the ethical tightropes you need to walk.
And this critical role of risk appetite, and maybe even more practically, risk tolerance in actually navigating AI's uncertainties day to day.
Understanding these concepts really does give you an edge in this rapidly changing landscape.
Definitely. And as we finish, maybe one final thought for you to chew on.
Go for it.
How might that balance, the balance between pushing innovation with AI and sticking to your established risk appetite? How might that need to shift as AI becomes even more central, more integrated into just everything organizations do?
Ooh, that's a good one. As AI moves from niche tool to core infrastructure, does the risk appetite itself need to evolve? Interesting question.
Something to think about. If you want to dive deeper into any of this, ISACA has extensive resources on AI policy, ethics, risk management. Check out their website.
Absolutely worth exploring further.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.